Welcome, everybody. My name is Ellen Foust, and I'm going to be leading this panel on ChatGPT in the classroom from the faculty and student perspectives. We bring you Learning Design Services brings you this conversation in a context of last summer. We had a very successful program on ChatGPT where we talked about how to actually use the software, how to work the software. Today, our focus is going to be on pedagogy, and hence we have a panel of 4 faculty and 1 student who are going to be talking about ChatGPT, not from the technology point of view, but from the pedagogical point of view. I'd like to start with a quote to set the mood, and I'm going to end with a question, because I think it's always good to end anything we learn with the question about what comes next. So embracing new technology is not just a choice, it's an investment in progress, a commitment to innovation, and a testament to the boundless potential of the human intellect. Now, I will go on record as saying that I don't know who wrote this quote, but ChatGPT gave it to me. So it could be a complete hallucination, or it could be from somebody. The point being that ChatGPT, we need to check on its veracity. But I like the quote, and I think it sets the tone of what we're talking about here, about embracing new technology being an investment in progress and in the future. Our distinguished panel consists of, if you could just identify yourself when I say your name, Karla Schallies from biology, Linda Sudlesky, who is on the learning design team and is a faculty member in education department, School of Education, Eugene Gallagher, marine biology, Melody Liu, also on our learning design team, who teaches computer science at Quincy College. And we have a student, Murad, I'm going to mess it up, practice too, Eyvazov, who is a computer science student here at UMass Boston. Okay, just a little housekeeping. I'm going to ask you all to watch your own microphones and keep them off and turn them on when you speak. And in order to speak, please use the hand raise icon so that I can see it. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn over the program to our first speaker, who's Karla.
I'm Karla Schallies, and I'm from the biology department, and I'm a senior lecturer. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit of how I use ChatGPT, both in my teaching, in my classes, and those are the classes that I teach, and in my personal use, because I do use ChatGPT recently quite often, actually. So I use it for 3 different classes, and I teach 3 different classes for the biology department, 2 different classes for the biology department, and 1 for the Navitas program. For the biology department, I teach medical microbiology. It's a 200-level class, and it's special for students who are doing nursing, pre-medical school, pre-dentistry, or any type of health-related degree. I tell them immediately, and actually you guys are going to see the text later on that I write in my syllabus. As soon as we start, we say ChatGPT is allowed in my class. And I actually encourage it, because when I read something by ChatGPT, at least grammatically edited by ChatGPT, the reading is easier. So I always tell them I definitely recommend that you do it. And what I tell them is that I want them to create the content and let ChatGPT do the editing. So I literally always even write on my own emails, human created, ChatGPT edited. They use ChatGPT specifically for lab reports, because that's the most written assignment that I have. And in that, they're allowed to use it to create the introduction. They do need to cite every sentence that is ChatGPT, so they have to do an in-text citation. And I also allow them to input the information with the results and let them create, ChatGPT create an order for the results. They also need to make sure that they put in it in the in-text references and in the official references. And I usually ask them to attach a paragraph that explains how they use ChatGPT. So the last paragraph after references is just a tiny paragraph where they tell me how they use ChatGPT on their assignment. When other people don't want to use ChatGPT through the whole process, but I offer they can use ChatGPT to analyze the draft of the lab report. And I ask that they ask ChatGPT if there are areas that they think that the software thinks that they need to do a little bit more in-depth search or find more ways to describe someone. For my other classes, in the basis of life, this is a Bio 101 class. It's for people who are not bio majors, and it's a general biology class. And usually students are really not interested in biology, but they have to take it because it's one of our general requirements. The class that I teach is specifically for students who are ESL. Everyone is ESL in the class, and some of them are in the silent period of the language. So they're able to understand what I say, but they're not able to communicate really well. So they get stuck trying to give me an idea. Even though when I give them their idea, they're able to understand it. So for me, I've been using ChatGPT in any and all assignments in this class. They're allowed to use ChatGPT. They can use it just for checking grammar, but also to help them with the writer's block, because we get a lot of the students who have an idea, but they're not even capable of telling me their idea. And they're usually encouraged to use it for all of their assignments to check their drafts and ask ChatGPT to analyze it. The other class that I teach that is not for the biology department, this is only for the Navitas program, is called University Skills. It's Uni 101. And it's a class that teaches the students about, so they're all international. So they teach them how to adapt to the university in the United States. Why do we have certain type of classes? And they're all ESL, they're all international students. So one of the things we need to talk about is plagiarism. And of course, as we talk about plagiarism, ChatGPT is the next topic immediately. I also encourage them to use ChatGPT in their assignments for that class. And I teach them how to use it for professional communication. So if you're going to send an email to your teacher, how do you write a professional email to your teacher? I do have a write-up in my syllabus, and it's a modified version of what Bryant University used on their syllabus. It was recommended by the university, and this is what I write. So one of the things that, again, I'm emphasizing more is you are using your own knowledge, but you are using ChatGPT to edit it and improve it and to give you recommendations, but it should always be used as a tool. So this is one of the texts, and I'm happy to share this text. This is one of the Bryant University offer that I don't allow ChatGPT, or I do allow ChatGPT, and I end up obviously allowing ChatGPT. Now, for my personal use, I do use ChatGPT a lot. I am a second language speaker myself, so my first language is Spanish, and I always make grammatical errors. So I always ask ChatGPT to check, and ChatGPT not only will tell me this is your modified text, I can also tell it, can you tell me what changes you made? So I'm able to track where my mistakes were. So it's a learning tool for me to see how often do I make the same mistake. In ideas for formal communication, whenever I send an email to a colleague, especially if it's a colleague that I haven't had like personal interaction, I ask ChatGPT, how would you approach this topic with someone? Recently, I used it to create a resume for one of my students who's applying for a job. And we said, let's try it. And it actually worked incredibly. I'm also taking a class right now in computer science, and I'm using it for creating, when I create the code, I input it and I say, this code is not working. Can you give me suggestions on how to make it work? And ChatGPT within seconds tells me what my mistakes are or suggestions it has. And finally, I'm using it for a lot of fun. My brother-in-law just turned 50, and we actually asked ChatGPT we put all the personality, all his traits, and we said, can you create a song for him? And we actually made it, printed out, and gave it to him as a birthday gift, saying ChatGPT wishes you happy birthday. So ChatGPT obviously is something that I'm definitely using in my class, and I'm going to continue using in my class. So I encourage everyone to use it. And I wrote in here that just try to ask other people how they're using ChatGPT. So obviously the learning design team is here to help us. But from one of the programs I took, I learned that the students not only interact with you and with the content, they also need to interact with their peers. So ask them how are the people using ChatGPT? In terms of the student content interaction, I'm actually telling them, you need to use ChatGPT. I want you to use it. If you use it, just let me know. Because the person who introduced me to ChatGPT was actually one of my students. So I do think we learn sometimes from our students more than we expect. So I wrote here at the end saying, if you are not sure how to use ChatGPT in your class, why don't you open the question to your students? How do you think my class will benefit from accepting ChatGPT? What assignments do you think could use ChatGPT? And again, it's because the person who introduced me to this was a student. So why not to learn from them in this case? And with that, I finished my presentation.
All right, thank you. We heard some very interesting ideas, and I like what you said about asking the student. They're probably way ahead of most of us in the use of this tool, right?
Yeah.
I saw a thumbs up from Carol Charisse. Okay, any pressing comment? We're gonna mostly hold the comments to the end, but if there's a pressing one that anybody has right now that can't wait, I'll entertain it. If not, I will now introduce Linda Sudlesky from the College of Education
and Learning Design Services.
and Learning Design Services.
Hi. So my presentation is just going to be a little less formal, where I wanted to talk a little about how I and my colleague have used ChatGPT and other AI tools to help prepare us for the course that we teach, as well as a student aid for getting through some of the deliverables. And we've also incorporated it into one of the assignments. So I want to do that by also sharing. I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to do is share Claude AI. So for anyone who's not familiar, Anthropic has this product, Claude.ai, that you can sign up for, and it's an alternative to ChatGPT that you can use. And the one day we were in one of our classes, we were talking about this assignment that we have, which is an annotated bibliography assignment. And one student, raised her hand, and she's like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what topics to research. I have no idea where to start. And I said, okay, well, I shared my screen and I said, let's ask ChatGPT or AI what topics are available. So I said, please list topics to research in information design and visual literacy. And you will get a number of bullet points of some really interesting topics that the student was like, oh, this is great. I just had no idea where to start. Thank you so much. So using it as an aid in this way, I think, can be very helpful. And that transitions into that annotated bibliography assignment that we have. When we when we were looking at our assignments and trying to decide, how we needed to revise our course to consider AI and ChatGPT's involvement, we said, okay, we went into the AI and we said, create an annotated bibliography on visual literacy. And so hold on a second. It's taking its time. Wait, due to unexpected capacity constraints, it's unable to respond to my message at this time, which happens a lot with both ChatGPT as well. But anyway, the point of doing this is, just like it did with this list, it came out with a whole annotated bibliography. And we were like, okay, we have to revise this assignment. So what we did was we just designed it to include the use of ChatGPT, and prompted our students to do preliminary searches using the tools, whether it's ChatGPT, Bing, Claude AI, or Bard, and then do a deeper dive into the findings using library search engines or Google Scholar. And we also asked for a brief analysis of how they felt the AI performed, and if the information they got from the tool was accurate, or took them in a different direction than they had anticipated going in. And so that was, this was only one example of what we have done. Another thing that I had done recently is I had asked ChatGPT to come up with good topics for discussions in an asynchronous online course, and it did that for me. So there are a lot of things that you can do from a preparation standpoint, I feel, and as incorporating it into your class as well. So with that, I am just going to pass it to the next person or take any questions.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. Any pressing questions? Nope. Okay. So next up is Gene Gallagher, marine biology.
Hi, this is my 41st year at UMass Boston. I'm an oceanographer, and I've taught at least 8 or 9 courses through the years. I'm now teaching undergraduate oceanography, and I teach the Intro to Environmental Sciences. I also teach the graduate statistics course for the School for the Environment. I first became aware of ChatGPT this past March in my undergraduate 200-level oceanography course. I have discussion posts each week, and they're challenging problems that really require you to think. And I grade them on a 1 to 10 point scale, and if you have an exceptional post, I give it a 12. And all of a sudden, about mid-March, I started awarding a large number of 12s. And this was about 5 weeks, 6 weeks into the course, and I was awarding 12s to students that often weren't attending class. They weren't aware of my lectures, and yet they were producing brilliant posts. And about that time, I learned of ChatGPT. And so I started feeding my prompt for the discussion into ChatGPT, and I was getting answers like, that were incredible and very similar to the ones that the students were posting. So I changed my syllabus, and I said that you can use ChatGPT, but you have to acknowledge it. And you also have to provide citations for anything, because I knew in my brief reading of it that ChatGPT hallucinates, and more than half of the citations in the scientific literature are wrong. And so I flagged about a half a dozen students that were posting citations. The students, whether they're using GPT or not, had to post citations. So I was able to flag a number of students, and I gave them zeros, but then I said, if you rewrite your post, and acknowledge ChatGPT and also get rid of all of the faulty citations, I'll grade it properly. With Gene Schwab's help, over the last 4 years, I've given a final exam based on a bank of questions. I have 118 questions for the final exam that I've developed over the 5 years of teaching the course. Each student gets 25 questions at random, and they can take it multiple times during a 3-hour period. It's open book, open notes, open web, but they're difficult questions. And the usual grade for the last 4 or 5 years has been mean and median, both about 75. This year was 85. And again, I had students that had attendance records that were terrible, and were showing up to 20% of the classes, and yet they were nailing an 85. And so I fed all 118 questions into GPT 3.5 and 4. GPT 3.5 got an 85, GPT 4 got a 94. And at that time, I was using it extensively. I do a lot of statistical analyses. I teach statistics. And I discovered that GPT-4, in addition to being able to handle most oceanography questions with ease, can also write wonderful R code. R is the statistical language for the natural sciences. It was developed about 25 years ago. I've been using it for about 20 years, and I teach my graduate course exclusively with R. I discovered that you could feed all of the problems from my textbook into R with just a slight modification, and GPT-4 will produce 40 lines of code to nail every question. And so I decided what I'm going to do. What am I going to do about this? I could no longer assign homework problems in the age of GPT-4. And so I decided to get every single student in my graduate class a license to GPT-4. So I'm probably the only professor that pays the $20 a month fee for each one of their students in their class. And I encourage the students to use GPT-4. And particularly for the weaker students that are just learning R for the first time, it's a godsend, because they can add the prompt, and they have to acknowledge that they're using GPT-4. But GPT-4 will not only give you the code, but it will also give you an explanation of what it's doing and what packages it's using. And so it has been quite good. I do have some students, one student in particular, who refuses to use it and said basically it's hindering my ability to learn the language. And so she's using other resources. and there are an abundant supply of resources available for teaching statistics and doing statistical analysis with R. And most of those sites like Stack Exchange have a note on the bottom of the first page that we do not accept any code written by ChatGPT or any AI program. In addition to using it for my coursework, I do use it in my research. I discovered that in my graduate statistics course, I offer master problems, really tough problems that take me at least an hour to solve, and often more than an hour. And students can get bonus points so that they can earn so many bonus points if they handle master problems. They don't even have to take the final. And so I fed the master problems to GPT-4, and it nails almost every one of them. And these are exceptionally difficult problems. These are basically, one of them is, Harold provides the Titanic 3 data set in his site, and then I provide the link to his site, and analyze the survivorship of all 1,300 passengers on the Titanic, and analyze the effects of passenger class, gender, and age on the survivor probability, and use a restricted cubic spline regression for passenger age with 6 knots. And you give this problem, the thing, it'll never get this. 100 lines of beautiful code generated in a second, nails the problem with a different approach from Harold. You have to learn some things about ChatGPT. It cannot run code. And so you have to, if it makes an error, you have to give it the error message and feedback. So it's an iterative process. But within a few iterations, you have it solved and you have a wonderful package of code, 100 lines long, sometimes 200 lines long of code. And then if you don't like the looks of the graph, you just specify, I want bigger symbols. I want the female symbols colored, filled solid. I want the male symbols open. I want males to be blue. I want females to be pink. And it'll do it, And so a session with GPT-4, can involve 60 iterative prompts back and forth. And if you pay for the license for GPT-4, all of that history of the interactions and all 20 prompts will be recorded. And so I have a paper using ChatGPT-4, and they're asking for an appendix with the sessions that produce the Titanic analysis, and they want me to reproduce it, and you can do that with GPT-4. People at UMass Boston said, why are you paying for GPT-4? It's free. It's not free. The Bing program will cut you off after about 4 prompts. It doesn't record your sessions, and then you start from new. So GPT-4, it's $20 a month, but it's worth every dime, for my students and for me. No, that's, it does pose severe problems. How can you give an open book final exam in the age of ChatGPT-4? And I still haven't solved that problem. And I'm not going to bring them all in for a blue book. So
maybe somebody in the discussion will have the solution for you. I think you said when we were prepping for this session that $20 comes from the student's lab fee.
Yeah, there is a student lab fee that they're paying for the course, and I basically got the School for the Environment administration to turn that lab fee over to running GPT-4. I also use it for all of the students in my undergraduate 121 class use R, and to develop the lessons for them on, for example, analyzing Boston Harbor chlorophyll A in production. I generate most of the code using GPT-4. I haven't made that leap to having 100 level students brand new to R, jump into writing their own code with GPT-4. But when they step into, I haven't taught the undergraduate course for a couple of years, but I would seriously consider using GPT-4. You can go into OpenAI and you can use GPT 3.5 for free. And that one does record the sessions. It doesn't cut you off. You do have an upper limit on how many prompts you can use in a given session with GPT 3.5. But I have discovered that GPT-4 is a heck of a lot better than 3.5.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off right there at a period rather than mid-sentence. And thank you very much. That was extremely interesting. And our next panelist is Melody Liu, who teaches computer science at Quincy and is on our learning design team. And she also uses this program for code. So it'll be interesting to see how you are similar and how you're different to what Gene is doing.
So I'm the newest member for learning design team, but at the same time, I'm teaching a website design course for a few years at Quincy College. So I've used the ChatGPT in multiple ways in my teaching. A little bit introduction about my course is that this is very intro level course. Some of my students are from the computer science bachelor degree, but usually they're like, it was their first class in computer science field, and it also can be elected by other major students. So basically, students at my class, they have zero background in using coding for web design. So my course objectives is teach them how to apply the HTML, CSS, JavaScript in the web design field from scratch. So the first thing I'm using is as using ChatGPT as code validating tools. You can see this example. This is the running the traditional model for validating tools. You copy paste the code into the validation machine. This is a traditional one, and it will give you some wording message said which one can which coding can be better, but it definitely is just briefly describe the issue, and then just throw out several hyperlinks, and you have to click on the links to explore your error and trying to fix it, find the solution on your own. So this is a very traditional model, and a lot of web developers, they're getting used to it because they already know the HTML knowledge. So they're very advanced level. They can use this traditional tool for no problem. But some of my students, they said those traditional validating way does not make sense to them. They need more guidance. So that's why I introduced the ChatGPT as the code validation tool, which it explains more closely and more in details, and definitely communicate with the users in a language that can more understandable. So students using this can easily find what's going wrong with the coding, and they usually it can have the solution right away. So of course, I didn't mandate my student use this, using this ChatGPT to replace the traditional validation tool. I always encourage them to try both and make their own selections, and they have preference to use either one of the tools throughout their course. The other way I use ChatGPT is using this tool to help them get started on the coding assignments. In doing so, as an instructor, I definitely want to measure that whether my learning objectives and the assessment still aligned. And in the assignment, I will emphasize on the application part of the knowledge. Think about like in the real world, we use the calculator for math class. So I want to do something similar that use the ChatGPT as a learning tool rather than a workaround or like a walk away from some like assessment tool. So this is the example that, for example, I have them to, this is the original assignment, have them to create a table. Students can go to ChatGPT and put some directions, put some prompts to get them started on this easy template, but they still need to make sense what the coding means. This is all they can learn from the textbook and the learning resources, but they need to apply this knowledge to really create a table by their own. So they need to fill in the content. And of course, the assessment didn't stop here. So usually they need the assessment, ask them to do even more. For example, I ask them to add styling to the table. And this is where they can back and forth to the ChatGPT to ask more and to input more prompts. And they need to try to be very creative, and they can add border, and they can add the different background color for the table. They can resize the table. They can do whatever they want, but without those knowledge learned from the learning resource, they cannot even input those prompts. They cannot get here. So that's what I've used the ChatGPT as a tool, really facilitate the learning progress, and the learning become more efficient for the students. And what I have been received as the feedback is that this tool definitely improved the student engagement and it reduced the errors. And I've received some positive feedback from my students from last semester. They said this tool really build up their confidence. Like I said, those students that have zero background in computer science, especially for the students in the other major, they feel very terrified in the beginning of the class that they have to use encoding. So they're using this tool, provide them with like a way that they can use the tool to generate the template and get started on. It's more release their panic in the very beginning. So that's what have been applied this tool so far, and I know that this is my first time trying ChatGPT in my class, and definitely I can do better. And I'm also open to any suggestions and to continue modify to in using the ChatGPT in my class.
When you know it, I had muted my microphone. What did I say that you didn't hear? I said thank you. I said thank you, Melody, for a very interesting discussion of how you use the tool in your class. So we've heard from 4 faculty members. Next up is Murad, who's a student, and I think he'll have he'll provide us with an interesting counterpoint to the point of view of the faculty members in the ChatGPT. So Murad, you're up.
Thanks so much. Hi everyone. My name is Murad Eyvazov. I'm a sophomore. I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree in the computer science. And I'll tell you more about my personal experience, how I was using the ChatGPT in my college life. Because the first time I met personally with the ChatGPT, it was the last semester, because it was completely something new for all of us. And when I started to using it, was something miracle for me, that there is a program that it's able to help you with many things, such as helping you with the ideas, or helping you to find your mistakes in any kind of things, for example, your essays or the codes. So for the student, it was really useful to use the ChatGPT, and I started exploring what's the abilities and what's the limits of this program. And there was one assignment from my philosophy class that our professor asked us to write essay, final essay. The limit of that essay was 3,000 words, and when I started writing that essay, I was able to write only 1,000 words at that moment, and I couldn't figure out how I can expand my essay and how I can add any new ideas to that. And at that moment, I came out with the idea, what if I will give some ideas to ChatGPT? What if I will ask the ChatGPT what I can write about? And I put all information about my assignment, and ChatGPT gave me the ideas how I can expand my essay. It gave me lots of variations because usually in one moment you can't figure out what you want to write about, and that ChatGPT will kind of open your mind and show you the things that you can't see normally. It will just show you the same idea but from different perspective. So you will say, oh yeah, obviously I could talk about that too. So it's always like that. That's why I think ChatGPT is really useful for personal use and for the academic use too, because there are lots of benefits, and the abilities of the ChatGPT is limited only with your imagination, because you can ask anything in any field any questions in any field to the ChatGPT, and will be able to answer really precisely, especially with the ChatGPT 4. As Eugene said, the ChatGPT 4 is really more advanced than the ChatGPT 3, because in the beginning we didn't have the ChatGPT 4. Only after the time that company OpenAI created ChatGPT 4, and ChatGPT 4 gave way more abilities and opportunities for the users to expand their prompts. That's why I think ChatGPT will be really useful, and we should not stop using the ChatGPT, because it's just a progress and it's our future. We can't stop the progress. So I think we should not stop users to use it. We should let them use it and find the ways how it can suit our life. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you to everybody. So at this point, what I'm going to do is to open it up to you all. And I see that I just noticed that the people who have spoken have their cameras on and everybody else is hiding. So I invite you, if you feel like it, to turn your cameras on. I would like to facilitate a discussion. So I guess I'm asking people's responses and thoughts, and if you have any questions. I see, oh, Paul is here, Gene Schwab, and one other raised hands. Okay, Gene Schwab.
I was going to ask Murad, did you run into any objections to your using ChatGPT? I wasn't sure, I wasn't clear on, did anybody give you a problem with that, or did you feel that you were free to use it?
In the beginning, last semester, most of my professors, they didn't even know about the ChatGPT. So I was telling them that there is a such program that it's able to help the students to figure out with the ideas, or help you to check your assignments. So the last semester, my professors, they didn't tell me that you can't use the ChatGPT, but only at the end of the semester, people started to know ChatGPT really well. So at that moment, my professors, they were talking about that. And a couple of my professors, they said that you can't use the ChatGPT, but I don't think that's the right way, because it's like you're giving the kid, it's like, for example, you're telling the kid that you can't play with this toy, and if you're not letting that kid to play with that toy, so you're encouraging that student to play with that toy even more, so he will try to find a way how to use it. So I think right now we just need to let everybody to use it, so they will play with it, find out what's the benefits of using it and what's the problems of not to use it. So I think that's the right way which we should do, personally.
Okay, thank you.
Karla?
I wanted to say that one of the things, and I want to make sure you guys can hear me. One of the things that happens, for example, to Eugene, and this is because maybe people won't know what to ask or how to ask. For example, with people with Eugene who had a problem with this coding, I think he has to start emphasizing more on what are the transferable skills that he wanted to teach. If he wanted to teach how to write a code, then can you teach another way to write a code? Can you ask the student to teach someone in their class how to write a code? And if the idea is how each line means something for the code, then can you make them teach it to someone? Because definitely you still have transferable skills we can teach even when ChatGPT is being used. So I just wanted to give that suggestion to people. That's it.
I think that's key. I mean, we can learn that Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States. You know, we can drill facts into our students, or we can teach them processes, how to do things, because ultimately the end game is to get out into the world and earn a living, right? And I think the skills if we can kind of marry the skills that they're going to be using in the workplace to the way we teach, I think we're way ahead of the game. I see David's hand up.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for this interesting, let's see, there we go. I think I turned that off. Thanks for the interesting ideas. You know, I started this term with my class of incoming graduate students, kind of trying to talk through, like, how do we use this in the class? Like, what's the ethical way and the right way to do it? And it's been an interesting discussion, and a lot of them really had a lot of hesitancy to kind of start doing this because of the kind of the longstanding sense that you know, this was just ended up in possible plagiarism accusations, or, you know, was not an appropriate tool. So a lot of the discussion has been about, like, if we're not just using this to, you know, kind of write an answer, like, what are the other ways of using this that are helpful? And certainly, like, the ideas of kind of the brainstorming aspects and potential of that, which a couple of people touched on. It's really seems very powerful for that. And the kind of abilities for assisting ESL students with kind of making sure that what they think they're saying is what they're saying, you know, seems really good as well. And it's also, I think, from the faculty side, what I've really come to think about it is that I really feel like it's forced me to think much more specifically about, like, what is the point of this writing assignment? What is it that I actually want you to develop as your capability from this assignment? And what is that capability that's not just, that goes beyond kind of what ChatGPT generates as an answer? Like, what are the actual kind of skill set or thinking set that I'm trying to help you work on? And I think if it prompts us to be more specific about that, I think that's only a good outcome. Less of a question, more of a comment, but thank you for.
I have a question for you, David. What do you teach?
I teach the class that I'm teaching right now is archaeological methods and analysis.
And
so yeah.
Maybe I zoned out, but are you actually using it in the class, or are you just pondering it at this point?
Well, essentially, I told the students at the beginning of the term, we're going to talk about it a lot because we're going to try and come to a kind of a, you know, this is an intro class for incoming master's students. We're going to try and come at the end to, like, a collective understanding of, like, what the right ways are to use this. You're starting our program now.
Okay.
Let's try and experiment, have everybody experiment and see what we come
So
to.
kind of like Murad suggested. He said that he was the one who was telling his teachers about this. So yeah, I think partnering with the students is really the way to go. I see Paula.
Hi, sorry I'm late to this really wonderful conversation. It's great. In my course, one of the things that I did with it, and
can you tell everybody what your course is, please?
Oh, I teach teaching undergrads course with pre-service teachers who are going to be going into the classroom and using technology in the classroom in K-12 scenario. And I kind of approached it from the perspective of how can you use it to sort of improve your processes and reduce your workload as an educator, right? One of the things that we did as an exercise was so that transferable skills, right? Take it to your workplace, writing a lesson plan. And we had it write a lesson plan for us for a course. And then we spent a lot of time discussing what it did and didn't do successfully in the process of writing that lesson plan. What was it missing? And then the undergrad, this was an undergrad class, as I stated, so they hadn't really written a lot of lesson plans, but they were able to point out and do that analytic work, right? So analyzing what was good and what was bad from that information, and then thinking about rewriting the prompt in order to get what was missing. So that transferable skill of, like, I love what you just said, David, about asking, what is it that I want the outcome to be for my students from this exercise? And why am I having them do this writing? Why am I having them do this activity? I think it's that you're analyzing, right? You're thinking about that, having these students who are pre-service teachers think about that and what they're trying to get, and use the prompt in a very successful way. And it takes practice, right? It takes practice of being able to have that conversation with this machine and brainstorming to get what the outcome that you're looking for. And everything that you get is editable, which I think, I love what Karla said about the code, right? Because I also use coding as an example for teaching, and that it's just a process of, I'm telling you all something. Can you do what I'm telling you to do after you're finished? And if you can, then my code or my explanation is very clear and worked. But if you can't, then I need to roll back and debug that and find a better way to explain it so that when I give you that information, you're able to do it. So having kids think about the fact that that editable process, and I love that ChatGPT sort of gives you that process back and forth, editing. Did it tell me what I wanted? Yes or no? So anyway, that's my little experience thus far, and I'm super excited in that realm.
Thank you, Paula. I'm going to read, I see Linda and Jean, but before I go there, I'm going to read a comment from Sarah, whose mic isn't working. Let's see, I'm reading. I am very impressed by how the professors are embracing ChatGPT as a tool instead of banning it. I am Director of Curriculum and Instruction in the Early College program at UMass, and I've spent my career as a high school math teacher until recently coming here. High school teachers are really scared of ChatGPT. From what I've seen, most are not yet teaching students to engage meaningfully with it. Before this video chat, I didn't even realize you could use ChatGPT, excuse me, for all these things. I also appreciate what Murad echoed about teaching students how to play with AI. If we want to prepare our students for the future, they need to understand how to productively use the tools available to them. Being encouraged to do that will help stop them from using these tools to supplant all original thinking. And she continues, and I'm almost done. In our early college program, high school students are taking UMass courses at their high schools, and we've already had one instance of students submitting an essay written by ChatGPT. My understanding is that the high school gave a presentation about plagiarism in response to that, and the messaging was for students not to use ChatGPT. I'd love to follow up with Karla or any other professors to think about how we can more productively talk with our early college students about ChatGPT to prepare them for success in college. Great. So that's what we're trying to do here, Sarah. So thank you for that comment. And Linda?
Hey, I just wanted to add to what Paula, the great information Paula was sharing. While she was talking about that, I went into Bing Chat and I prompted Bing Chat to write a measurable learning objective for learning accessibility in the context of visual literacy and information design. Please include a condition, behavior, and criteria. And there you have it. So there's another way that we could use ChatGPT or an AI tool such as that to help us with developing our learning objectives. So that's another use.
Thank you, Linda. Jean Schwab. Mute.
Sorry, muted. I want to follow up with what Jean was saying before about R, and because I don't do much programming anymore. And it sounds like what you were talking about, the R programming, is that maybe it reaches a point where it gets to be maybe so repetitive or something that it's not worthwhile for somebody to be doing all of this manually. It's a language where you understand the coding, but at some point it's just too labor intensive. Am I correct on that? Oh, we have to unmute.
I'll click on the unmute.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I've been using R for about 20 years, and they're just, so many things that, particularly in graphics, there are so many twists and turns in the ggplot commands, and you may want to do something, just really specific. I want open symbols for, station 1. I want closed symbols for station 2. You just put it in the prompt, and all of a sudden you'll get, 8 lines of code.
Right.
It just saves so much work and having to go through
right.
There are manuals for ggplot, but they're complex, and the notation is somewhat archaic. And so I know what I want. I know ggplot can do it, and so I was doing that just 5 hours last night for, graphics for my 121 Intro to Environmental Science lab class. I wanted a right axis. I wanted chlorophyll A on the left axis. I wanted light on the right axis. And I wanted one of them done with dots, the other one done with lines. And just in 3 sentences, I got GPT-4. You have to make it understand what you want. And you get beautiful graphs out.
Yeah. So my feeling on the reason I asked that is that this reminds me of kind of when I was like, I was taking a CPA exam, and they said, you can't bring calculators to the exam because it's really important that you know how to do, long division and when we had to use slide rules and things like that, and they made you do it, and they would ban you from using those tools because it was important that you knew how to do it, knew how to do things the hard way. So it's kind of like saying that if you can't use ChatGPT to do R because it's really important that you know how to program R in order to do those things. And therefore, students who are deprived of the use of ChatGPT, and in this case, maybe because they're not given the $20 a month to buy the tools necessary to do that, are made to do some things in an actually a ridiculous fashion now that we have these tools that will do this coding, which is kind of at this point absurd to do by hand when the technology exists to do that for them. Does that kind of make sense? If you're following
Makes
what I'm
sense to
saying.
me, and I'm going to cut in because I want to be respectful of every. Thank you, Gene.
I just wanted to get
I think it makes great sense.
yeah.
But we're 4 minutes before the
Yeah.
top of the hour, and I want to respect everybody's time. So the first thing I want to do is, we've had some quiet people. Is there any of the quiet people who would like to have the mic to make a comment or ask a question or anything? Okay, if not, I'll wrap it up. I've been listening carefully and taking some notes, and three words have popped out of this conversation in real time. This is not a prepared wrap-up speech. The words, one of the words is progress, and I had that in my opening quote where I said, embracing new technology is not just a choice, it's an investment in progress. And then I heard Murad use the word progress, that this is progress, and the kid has a new toy, and we need to let the kid play with that toy. And I mean, I think I must have picked that. I picked that as my opening quote because I think that's where we're at with this. It is progress. The other, I guess it's 2 words, not one. The other concept that I heard come up more than once is transferable skills. And I think that's a key point we want to remember. We are here to talk about pedagogy, but I think our pedagogy has to respect the skills that our students are going to use when they're in the workplace. And we need to kind of work hand in hand with knowing what those skills are and then create a pedagogy that will bring the student to understand how to do those skills. And then the third word that I heard was engagement. And for any of us in the learning design or education business, we know that engagement is the name of the game in everything. And I heard that ChatGPT, or generalize it to other AI tools, can be a way to facilitate engagement. I heard Karla say, engage that I think it's almost a direct quote, have to engage not only with you, the faculty member, but also with the content and also with the peers. And that's the three keys that as learning designers, we're always telling faculty who come to consult, engage with the content, with you, the content and your peers. And I heard everybody talking about engagement. So I'd like to end on that word. And thank you all for coming. We're exactly, if I talk a little bit longer, we'll be exactly an hour. That's okay. So thank you all. I appreciate all the panelists who volunteered, and Murad as a student who came to help us out. And I think we're just at the beginning of this conversation. Well, not I think. I know this is just, a foray into a very beginning parts of this conversation. I think it's something we need to continue here at the university, and hopefully we'll all go forward and grow and learn about this together. Thank you.